Okay, I think it's now or never, you guys. This is Yoga Talks Podcast. My name is Jay Brown. How's it going? Are you new? If so, welcome. Otherwise, thanks. I am coming to you from Finland. I'm staying in a town called Haga, which is about 20 to 30 minutes outside of Helsinki. It's where they got me holed up here. And I meant to do this before I left. I had planned to be done with this before I departed, but time conspired against me. It didn't happen, so I had to just throw this little recording rig in my bag and make it happen while I'm in Finland, and that's what I'm doing right now, but it's kind of late. I'm a little bit tired because I'm halfway through a 6-day training intensive. And anybody who's done like a yoga training intensive where you do these like really long intensive days know that by the time you're done with a day, you're pretty spent. But fortunately, it's one of those groups that really fuels you. It's a small group, which means less money, frankly, and certainly that occurs in my mind like, oh crap, I didn't make as much money as I might have hoped. But at the same time, the reality of what's been happening in the sessions for the last 3 days has been awesome. Like, everybody in the group is so completely engaged, and there's so much wonderful exchange happening. It's one of those experiences that makes you feel like you're doing something important. And I guess sometimes it's that small group that feels like that. Sometimes maybe even more than that big crowd, I guess. Well, in any case, I am enjoying Finland. I do like it here very much. It's easy to be here. People speak English for the most part. And again, the people here tend to be, at least the people who are coming to work with me, they're really deeply engaged in their inquiry of yoga. And that is very exciting to me. Not unlike many of you, the podcast listeners, who continue to send me very wonderful emails. Maybe I'll read one of those next week. But the other thing about being here in Finland is that I definitely feel like I'm hiding out. I'm basically hiding out from my life. You put yourself in this bubble, this yoga training intensive bubble, and you remove yourself. I'm just like, I'm gone from all this stuff that is there, like my responsibilities and everything that's waiting for me back home, which is only, a couple days away, another 3 days, 4 days or so, I'll be back home. But I really appreciate this just brief kind of respite, this kind of hiding away before I face it. But I don't want to get into that. Not today. Next week, maybe we'll get into the turns of my course. But today, we're going to listen to this podcast I recorded with Leslie Kaminoff. And it's fitting because Leslie has sort of paved the way for me in certain ways. I've talked about it before on the podcast, opening the Breathing Project and me teaching at the Breathing Project for a long while. That did sort of, set a stage in my mind that led to me doing what I've done for the last 10 years. And now the Breathing Project has shut down its doors as they were, entering new phases. And this podcast I record with Leslie was sort of to mark that. He's been doing this series, this oral history series since a couple of years, and he asked me if I wanted to come do the last one at the Breathing Project and that I could record it for the podcast. So that's what you're going to hear. Me and Leslie in front of a small, intimate group of friends talking about whatever we could think to talk about. Honestly, it was slightly unusual for me because it didn't feel like a normal podcast setup, because it was Leslie inviting me to be part of this event at the Breathing Project, essentially, this live talk. And so I didn't really go in there with much agenda or idea about, what we should talk about. I wasn't really sure if Leslie had an idea about what he wanted to talk about. I learned pretty quickly, like when we started, that he didn't come in with any agenda either. He just showed up to have a conversation with me. And so we wander some, but we touch on some, I think, important stuff and interesting stuff, and maybe meaningful to people who spent time at the Breathing Project, for sure. And I just think also in terms of, the changing landscape, as I'm always talking about it here on the podcast. I think sort of seeing how things are evolving and where the yoga's going and what people are doing, it's important to note. The other thing I want to say, I guess, about this talk with Leslie is that while I was doing it, I felt really emotional in a very almost disarming way. Like I'm okay with getting emotional, and if you listen to the podcast for long enough, you've heard me do it on the podcast. But in this talk, it felt like almost like there was this emotion that it's like I couldn't let it out. Like if I let it out, I would have broken down too much, and I wouldn't have been able to do the podcast. Like it was too raw. Like I was really tired on the day, honestly. And there's actually a moment in this podcast where I lose my train of thought. And that's not really ever happened to me while recording one of these podcasts, where I just have a complete brain fart. And I really wanted to edit it out. But Leslie, you'll hear, he calls me out on it, says, you better not edit this out. So he kind of made it impossible for me to edit out. So it's still in there. But I was in kind of a state, and I felt like there was something really brewing underneath, and it was almost like I couldn't let it out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to complete the podcast. And it was, partially about Breathing Project closing, but it was like a lot of other things too, And so there's that underlying current throughout this talk, which I feel like colored the conversation a lot. And I am hoping that you'll appreciate it today. Before we listen to the talk, let me just mention my stuff. I am going to be in Falls Church, Virginia at the Yogi Underground, Sunday, September 10th. I'm going to be in Tokyo, Japan, September 29th through October 8th. And I am going to be in Tarrytown, New York at Riverstone Yoga, November 5th. You can find out about those events and listen to the archives of this podcast and read my blog or find my online yoga video offerings at jbrownyoga.com. Maybe you would want to hook the podcast up and show us a little love. Go to iTunes, write a review, give us some stars. Or maybe you'd want to go to a blog or podcast page and make a direct donation. Your support is greatly appreciated. What else? I am going to tell you who's coming on next week on the other side. Lots of fun guests coming on. And otherwise, like I said, I'm holed up here in Finland, and I'll be home soon. And let's do it. Let's go ahead and talk to Leslie Kaminoff at the Breathing Project one last time.
Are we already recording? Oh, okay.
We don't have to be starting now if you don't want to start yet. I've got this with a room mic so that if we want to have audience participation, we'll have that just fine.
Oh, that's good. So these are active too?
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
All right.
We should be good.
But
Everything's
they're on
looking
a separate
okay.
channel, right? So you can cut them out when you don't need them.
That's right.
Wow, you got this shit going on, man.
No, I've been doing it for a little while. Just looking back, it's been like over a year and a half since we had our conversation for the podcast.
Yeah, well, it's not like anything's happened since then.
Yeah. Well,
So-
a lot. I mean, I touched base with Amy again.
Yeah.
And, I always intended that you and I were going to do another one, and it just sort of timed out right.
Well, we did try to schedule it, but earlier, when the normal, cycle would have come up for this program. But you were, you were in Montana.
Yes, I was.
Yeah.
I was at the Feathered Pipe Ranch in Montana, which was a cool trip.
Yeah, so I gather. Excellent. Yeah. So, but it seemed that this was the ideal time to schedule it because this is sort of like officially our final week of, well, not exactly. I mean, it depends how you define final. We're having the closing party in a couple of days,
Yeah.
and the tag sale.
Yeah.
So we're selling a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Props for sale.
Props for sale. But you have to leave them here. See, this thing, if you have to, anything you buy that's like yoga prop wise, you have to leave because next week Amy's doing her week-long immersion.
Right.
And then the week after that, I'm doing my week-long immersion on the bandhas.
I see.
And then we're done.
Then you can have the stuff.
Then you can pick up your stuff. But this is the last inside story of yoga in the West.
Mm-hmm.
You were here for the first one
I was.
on September 11th, 2014. Right?
Yeah.
And here we are on July 13th, 2017, wrapping it up.
I know. How's that been feeling?
Yeah, I've been getting that question a lot, and I've been giving sort of a stock answer.
Yeah. What's the stock answer? And then you'll give us the other one besides the stock one, maybe.
People are asking me how I've been feeling about all this, and I say everything.
Yeah.
I'm feeling everything that I'm able to feel. Nostalgia, big part of nostalgia. Some sadness. Pride. Certainly a lot of pride in what we've accomplished when I look back, And I'm getting hits of that as people have been checking in with us who we've known over the last 14 years. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of that. Anxiety.
Yeah.
You would know anything about that.
I'm
move you've just done.
Intently because, I'm looking at the timing of things for me too in the next few months, and I keep hearing that song. I'm going through changes. That song. It's just been ringing in my head because it seems like so much is changing.
I would just go with the Bowie stutter on the one word.
Okay.
Yeah, for me. Anyhow.
Yeah. Come on, you wanted to do it, you see? You wanted to do it. I went all the way and just sang the song in my head because I wanted to, and he wanted to do it, and he just half did it.
Microphone in my hand and singing are not things I do.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It's risky. It's risky.
We should point out we have a live audience.
It's good that we have a live audience.
Yeah, unless listeners haven't noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And the clicking in the background is a professional photographer recording the event who also happens to be my beloved partner, Lydia, who's been part of this from the very beginning, since before the beginning. Mm-hmm. Lydia did all the photography for the Yoga Anatomy book project. Mm-hmm. So all the drawings in the book started off as images in her camera, and we did a lot of the shoot here in this room.
I remember the big plexiglass setup.
I know.
So you could shoot from underneath.
You were up on the plexi at one point.
No, I wasn't up on the plexi.
Oh.
I was Trikonasana. I was seated cross-legged.
You did all the seated postures, yeah.
Still
and you were so thrilled to be Krishnamacharya adjacent on that page, because we used him for the front view of Mula Bandhasana, and we used Eddie for the underneath view of Mula Bandhasana. So he was on the plexiglass doing Mula Bandhasana. And the funny story about that he was kind of sweaty with all the lights and everything, and plexiglass is slippery. So he couldn't flip both his feet at the same time into Mula Bandhasana. So we had to shoot one side and then shoot the other side. And then Lydia had to stitch them together in Photoshop.
Oh.
Only, I'm going to tell the story. I got to tell the story. Only what was happening was when he was doing a one-sided Mula Bandhasana, all of his scrotal material moved over to the other side. And then, of course, he'd flip the other side, and then there was a similar scrotal movement away from the foot. So when we photoshopped the two sides together, there was this like enormous four-balled package that we had to deal with.
I see.
Thank goodness for Photoshop. Sorry, Eddie. Sorry about that.
That's very funny.
We still have that photo, but it's not for public consumption. Like the retouched version. Mm-hmm. One of these days, maybe.
Well, I'm trying to think back. When was that photo shoot?
2003 and 2004, we were doing photos.
Yeah.
Wait, no, that's too early. Sorry. Actually, this is the 10th anniversary of it being finally published.
Okay.
So we're talking now 2005, 2006 would have been the photo shoots for Yoga Anatomy. We blew so many deadlines on that project.
Yeah, we talked about that some in our last podcast together. You missed a few deadlines.
We did.
And you had been teaching the course before the book too, though, to some degree, right?
Well, that's why the book happened, because of me sort of being out there as someone that taught Yoga Anatomy and the Yoga Anatomy course. That's how the publishers tracked me down and approached me for the project. After Roger Cole couldn't do it. I found out later I wasn't the first choice.
I see.
No, I ran into Roger at a Yoga Journal conference, and he congratulated me on the book, and then he told me, well, Human Kinetics came to me first with this project.
He did that as a little jab, right?
Well, no. Yeah. It wasn't maybe, I don't know. I don't know if he meant it to be a jab, but the big deal with a project like that, and the biggest expense are the illustrations. Medical illustration is not cheap. And I was the one who was able to find the illustrator who could do it for the budget that they had. And apparently that was the sticking point with Roger. He was certainly technically capable of writing a book about yoga anatomy. Mm-hmm. They came to me after... it didn't work out with Roger, and then I found the illustrator, and then we started working on the drawings, and we had all these great photos, and they were being turned into drawings, and it was at that point that I realized that I couldn't do the project on my own.
Right.
And thank goodness I was able to sort of suck in Amy to the project. Mm-hmm. There was no really recognition on either of our parts of the magnitude of this thing that we were embarking on, So if we had known, I mean, it's amazing that first edition got out. Let's just leave it at that. At all.
And then all the things it led to, though, it led to a lot.
It led to Amy and I being very busy traveling all over the world and teaching. Which is not going to stop once the breathing project closes. In fact, it'll get more intense because I won't have to rush back here every Wednesday to do the course, during the academic year.
I was just talking with Amy Apolti about this afternoon for a podcast that'll come out maybe just before this one. And she was saying the same thing about how when you have like a place that you kind of make a community in, you feel... obligation to that, to serve that thing that you started. And then you have invitations that you can't take in order to serve that,
Sure.
And so sometimes when, I don't know, that's what I've been thinking about, and what she was saying, that is part of letting go of a long-standing community did free her up.
Sure. Well, I think that was very much the situation that Elena found herself in, with Vera. Of just becoming so much in demand all over the place. It's like you can't really, you can't do both. ultimately, if you want to do it well. Now, the fact that we've been able to keep the programs here going with our travel schedules has been nothing short of, I don't know, I don't want to say miraculous. It's been stressful. What word would you... Let's just
call it out.
Let's just call out the team here that made that possible. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
I've heard of the meetings. that you guys have had.
Yeah, well, Sarah and Gigi and Leah and Elena, the studio manager, without a team like that. And it's a dream team. I mean, we joked about it in the last few staff meetings here as we're winding down. We just had the very last staff meeting a couple of days ago. That it's like, damn, we've just got it right. It's just like, it's well-oiled machine, everything going off like clockwork, like all of that. And time to shut down. So we got it right.
Well, I don't know. It does feel like things have shifted and changed a lot.
They have for us and for the yoga world. And I was thinking of the irony of that, of what it's taken at various times to keep this place alive, to keep it going.
I remember going to an auction. I remember like a big auction and celebs and stuff.
The fundraiser.
The fundraisers. I remember
the auction was part of the fundraiser. Yeah, and we needed that to keep it going. But that nearly killed us. I mean, Lydia and I were in a funk for a couple of months after that because it was just such a huge endeavor. But we needed to do that to keep the place going, pay off some debt. But the irony I was thinking about is, just the times I felt like the place was literally on life support and just hanging on by a thread. And all of the people who pitched in over the years to keep it going, and then to say, okay, now we're going to voluntarily put it down. It's just an interesting thing for me to think about and to feel about as we're approaching the final days here.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't often happen that way. I mean, you're going through a similar thing with Abhyasa.
Yeah.
Where you could have kept it going. Kinda.
Yeah. I've talked about it before, though. It's kind of, I mean, it may be different for you guys than for me because you're sort of structured differently,
Yeah, like we weren't paying ourselves.
Well, not like I pay myself either, really, but just that, I don't know, at a certain point, like you said, it is a lot of work. So after you've done it for like a decade or more, at some point, I think sometimes it doesn't feel like you're moving forward. It feels like you're holding on to something. I'm speaking for myself, maybe more than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, Amy and I were having discussions leading up to the decision about, let's look at what's coming next because, basically the conversation is framed by the terms of your lease.
Yeah.
The commercial lease they go in 5-year chunks,
Yeah.
And we started to have these discussions amongst ourselves because we were both, getting very busy with outside teaching and other projects. And then when we brought it up to our team, is like, okay, we're thinking at the end of this next lease cycle, which ends in 2019, we're going to call it quits. And as soon as we said, as soon as we introduced the idea of calling it quits, it was like, well, why are we waiting that long?
Yeah.
It's going to feel really weird to keep going for, at that point, it would have been 4 more years, knowing it's going to end. It's like, let's just end it 2 years early. Only it's not really ending.
Well,
we've got the Babies Project, which Amy talked about on your podcast,
which we can get to, which I think is a really interesting turn, actually.
Yeah, it's an amazing turn. Yeah. It's another sort of miraculous thing.
But I mean, what I think's interesting about it is, and Amy said this when I spoke to her recently, that it is a little bit of a turn in a sense, away from like the yoga world. You know, Amy said that like she wanted to expand into new possibilities. Mm-hmm. So I think it is a little bit of a turn, and I think that's
well, looking at it from the outside, I can see how it would look that way. But
it's still
core,
yoga. Like she teaches yoga, even though she doesn't call it. That's my opinion, but
yeah. Well, when you look from the outside at certain things, it's easy to say, "Oh, well, they're not even doing yoga anymore." And we'll probably even join in and agree and add to it. We're probably not even really doing anatomy anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, from a certain perspective of what people expect when you come to learn anatomy. Uh-huh. But as far as core principles are concerned, and the way that we have always valued connection and relationship, it's non-different as far as I can tell. You know. Yeah. It's just it's being more effective because you know you're going to save some people from needing to even do yoga at some point.
I think I was like specifically thinking of it in terms of its outer appearance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In terms of like the world that we inhabit from like a business stance even, or from like a professional or career stance. Because I'm thinking about this place, you know. Been like a home base, even when we've talked about this previously, when you guys when you first opened this place, which I'm curious, were you the one who found the space? Did you like look around and pick this one? What was the decision process? Why did you pick this space?
Well, picture this long rectangular space with no walls, and just windows down both sides, with open light and space, to the east and to the west, which you never get in New York.
Yeah.
So I came in here, there was a light flooding, and it was just this huge open space. And I don't know if you go through this, and maybe some yoga teachers who are listening can relate to this. I still can't walk by an empty space for rent and not picture a yoga class in it. It's a sickness.
Once you opened a place, you do, like the thought occurs to you, it's like, I could do a center there.
And I would think that I've been cured of that after having, gone through the 2 studios in my life. But when I saw this space, it was like, the space itself sold it. And the rent was doable back then.
Yeah.
And I got a quick hit on the dimensions. I drew it on a piece of graph paper. I figured out where the walls needed to go and all of that. And I basically laid it out in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I remember so clearly that very evening, Zach was celebrating his 30th birthday. Mm-hmm. And I just put the piece of paper down in front of him on the table and said, "Happy birthday, motherfucker." We got a studio. Basically, that was...
Yeah.
That was... how it got started. I was working with a real estate agent, and he showed me 1 or 2 spaces which didn't work. But this was very close to where I had previously been working with my private practice.
Yeah, you had like an office space already or something.
Yeah, on 22nd and Broadway, in a building there. I was just renting a room from a bodyworker friend of mine. Uh-huh. And I was just there for 5 years just doing private work. That's all I was doing at that point.
Uh-huh. And then this place started. I remember and we talked about this before too, that it felt like kind of a coup.
A coup?
Like a coup of sorts. Like in the sense that there was all these centers starting to pop up. Mm-hmm. And it was like the earliest vestiges of like, the fitnessization of the practice.
Fitnessization.
I don't know, that just came to mind because I've been thinking about the fitness element versus other elements. But I remember just feeling like, I said this before, the reason why I decided to teach was not because I was making money, but just because like I wanted to be here. I was like, this was
you had the freedom to teach any way you wanted to teach.
Yeah.
That was the whole point.
It was like it signified certain things that I was interested in, like a certain independent, not non-dogmatic.
Free space.
Yeah.
Well, and let's not forget back then we were actually still using the word Vinaya Yoga.
Sometimes, yeah. We hadn't gotten that email yet or whatever.
Well, the email came in 2003, just a few months after we opened the space, the email from Desikachar saying, basically he said, he spoke of his frustration about this sort of branding of the yoga that was associated with him and his father. And he basically said, if you want to continue to have a relationship with me, please stop having a relationship with this word, Vinaya. Mm-hmm. And we weren't really invested in it, in the word as a brand at all. So it was just basically a couple of places on the website, and it was done. And, we started just calling it breath-centered individualized yoga.
I know, but I think of that as one of the most, a very significant thing that happened in a way. Because if he hadn't said that, I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who would have very happily adopted that one word
just fly that
as,
flag
as their brand.
Sure.
And I've always said this, like it's if someone comes in and says, what kind of yoga is this? I don't have a one-word answer to give them. So it requires a conversation, which is great for yoga, just terrible.
Well, that's how I felt about it. If you can describe your yoga in one word to somebody, and they can convince themselves that they actually know something about what you're really doing after hearing that one word, I find that problematic.
Yeah.
But just to be clear on the history of that, that was not an unprecedented move on Desikachar's part. This started very close to when I began with him, which was in 1988. Because the very next summer, we all showed up to Colgate University expecting the inauguration of this Vinaya Yoga certification program that I had personally managed to wheedle my way into, by the way.
I remember you told us the story.
Whole other story. But and then in the very first meeting, everyone is in the room, all the senior teachers, all the people that were on the board of Vinaya Yoga America, which had put this whole thing together, and he basically says, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Yeah. I don't want to have anything to do with certification. I'll teach, and you'll learn, but the idea of somehow standardizing it in a way that could be taught in a certification program was anathema to him. And more so, what was a problem was that now there was an organization in between him and his students. It's like he needed to deal, certain decisions that needed to be made by Vinaya Yoga America needed to be made by the board of Vinaya Yoga America. Now, the board was comprised of people that he had individual relationships with. And he valued that above all else. And the thought that this organization was going to interpose itself in some way in those relationships, he felt constricted by that. He felt like his freedom to have these relationships was being affected, and he didn't want anything to have anything to do with it. So I saw the 2003 thing to be the final nail in the coffin of what I saw him start in that room in 1989. And he finally got everyone to drop the term Vinaya Yoga, except a bunch of people in Europe. He could never get them to stop using it. And Gary Kraftsow.
Yeah.
He wasn't about to rename his thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so interesting. I mean, it's making me think about how at that time, or I totally lost my train of thought.
That happens.
It does. You were talking about...
You'll find it.
No, you were talking about the Vinaya Yoga thing and talking about... Single word,
elevator conversation.
Oh, I know what I was going to say.
There you go.
I was going to say that it makes sense to me then, and we can totally edit out that so it'll be clean on the podcast.
No. I'm not going to let you edit. By the way,
I was going to say that
we're not going to let Jay edit out the part where he lost his train of thought. It's staying in because I'm still talking about it.
It's been a long day, but hearing you talk about hearing you talk about that meeting and Desikachar saying that, it to me goes to like the origins of this place, which was a truly, like we've talked about, this kind of collective thing. And on the podcast of late, we've been talking a lot about like new models for yoga centers. And you asked me just before we started about the conversation I had with the woman in Boston who's switching the teachers over to employees rather than independent contractors.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have been emailing me with these ideas for creating collective structures, you know? And I keep saying the same thing to everybody, like, show me an example that's worked.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a lot of them. And I have to say, like, we started out with some pretty lofty ideas. And we talked, they had those punch cards and stuff. And it didn't really pan out. Like,
well,
totally.
We tried. Yeah. Well, at a certain point, we realized we weren't a yoga studio.
Yeah.
I mean, it was that simple. And what was connecting with people were the programs. My yoga anatomy course, Zach was teaching his own material. And then, of course, Amy, when, Amy became a full partner and started teaching her material, the idea was that, wow, this is something new. It's like a secondary level education place for other yoga teachers. Which was awesome because we get to like not compete with all of our friends that are running their own teacher training programs, right?
I remember you were out of the fray of the certification early on. I remember sitting in your office and pitching a 200-hour training to you.
Yeah, what did I say?
I want to do it. You were like, "Oh, that's
was I
nice,
polite?
Jay." You were polite.
Okay.
You know, you were kind and you listened to me. But I came out of the meeting with a clear. It was clear. I was like, that's not going to happen at the reading project.
Not really.
Like you were out of that. And I remember my pitch to you was, there's all these other crappy 200-hour trainings out there. The breathing project should have a good one.
A non-crappy 200-hour training.
A non-crappy, which is what I tried to go do at my place as best as I could. But
I would send people to you. I'd love sending people to you. I sent my son to you to do his 200.
That's a cool thing that happened.
Yeah.
I got to have your son in my training.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it was awesome to have you here, and you just finished Amy's.
Yeah.
So you never really left. Jay.
No.
Yeah, but I think this place is kind of an incubator, also. You know, because other people went off and did their own thing. Paula Tercy started Reflections. She was in the very first. That first year we did the anatomy training. There were a lot of really cool people in it, you know, like Joe, who went on to be one of the really senior people at OM, and Paula, and I'm spacing out on a bunch of the names I shouldn't be remembering now, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, but it does for me go to this place has kind of existed in the margins in certain ways. Like it wasn't a yoga center proper, like drop-in classes ever. Although teachers rented a space and kind of did their own programs, but you never, like you said, it never really ran like a straight yoga center.
No, but the people who were teaching here back then, there was Carl Horowitz,
right,
and Andy Sugarman were also part of the original crew. Jyoti Larson came in pretty close to the beginning. She was still doing her Yoga Mom Buddha Baby thing.
That's right.
Jyoti, for those of you who have Yoga Anatomy, is in the book as the pregnant lady in sort of the Supta Baddha Konasana with the sort of fetus being depicted in her belly. And that was just, we shoved a Gertie bowl under her shirt for the photo, and then we basically drew the baby, and so she was part of it. But people taught here because no one was telling them what to teach. It's that simple, and that there's a value in and of itself to, even if it's basically costing you money to teach here, which it was.
Yeah.
You weren't making money, but to have a place where you could work on your material, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
With total freedom and no agenda to stick to. Of course it's not going to make money.
Yeah.
The studios that make money are the ones that have an agenda. They have they have some, a product, basically, that you're going to get some consistency with.
Well, also, I mean, it's interesting because I announced that I was going to close this center, and then, I got a bunch of people who made all these offers to buy it off of me. And so I've been entertaining them. You know?
So let's be clear. What is it you're actually buying
That's
when
why
you buy a
that's why
yoga
I brought
studio?
it up. That's why I brought it up.
What is the thing you're
really,
paying money for?
You know, there's a list of things that we could come up with that people, you know, are buying in terms of like location, access to the lease, you know, an already existing student base.
Is there intellectual material that's part of this? Is there an Abhyasa class that's going to get taught at the old Abhyasa studio?
Well, that's the thing. You know, I don't. It kind of depends on who I'm talking to and what they have in mind, what their agenda is. You know. But it's just very interesting to me, the idea of when we create these spaces and we like do this work in them, and then there's something that happens, like when you walk into a room where a bunch of people have practiced and gathered and inquired together, you can kind of feel that, you know?
So you're paying for the vibe.
Kind of, it seems. But I guess the really weird thing about it is you know, the way that things have gone, you know, if you wanted to continue on, like you said to me, you could keep it going if you wanted. If I was going to do that, I would have to do certain things from like a business standpoint to try to make it fly more that I've never had to do or wouldn't want to do.
Right.
And when you say that we didn't run them to make money, that's kind of what I talked with Andrew Tanner about, that like there's a difference between owning your job and like owning
that was a good distinction
business,
he made.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, and it seems to me that, I don't know about you, but I never had like, you know, projections and targeted sales profit goals that I was trying to hit. It was always just having a space.
Well, not
to do
going
the work.
broke is kind of a goal.
Yeah,
but you know,
being able to make the payments or whatever. But it was always just so we could have the place to be in the space to do the thing that we wanted to do.
Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
You know, do you sell your mailing list to the person that gets the space? You know, do they want to? Do they want to continue to attract the same people into the space that have been going there for your classes?
I would say the people I've talked to so far, not necessarily. Like I've spoken to some teachers who would.
It's a real estate deal, plain and simple.
Kind of, and I gotta admit it, that part of me even wonders that if it was like a hot center, in that location,
hot in the sense of heated room, or hot in the sense of popular.
Both. But that it, I don't want it, but it probably would do better business-wise, probably make more money.
Well, it's a great location.
Given the makeup of the neighborhood and how it's changed and stuff.
Yeah. So I hope you get something out of it. I really do.
I haven't decided.
It's hard.
You know?
I mean, look at what I was thinking of Vera and Twisted Trunk.
Yeah.
You know, Susanna's sitting here. That was kind of a, you know, trying to carry over and keep the audience and keep the vibe going. And it worked for a while, but it's a struggle. It's a real struggle.
I just think, again, the overhead gets to a certain point where it's like the frog in the water, you know? And when does it becomes too much to bear or something? I mean, you can try to keep toughing it out, but that's why I even feel like I've talked to some teachers about they might want to carry on and keep it like in the spirit, you know? Because I have to admit, like I opened it in the shadow of you opening this place as an alternative, specifically as an alternative. You can watch the video on the homepage for many years ago. It says this is an alternative to the boot camp styles. But now I'm talking to people who want to basically buy it and turn it into boot camp style. Well, because
they're smart. They look out there in the yoga landscape and they see the studios that are making money. Those are the studios that are making money. Because that's what brings in lots of people.
Yeah. See, but what I think, again, is that that's contingent on the high overhead. Like, if you have that high overhead, then you have to get that many people. And, like, I talked to Cindy Lee. She's in some little town in Virginia. Yeah. She's like, I only need to teach 2 or 3 classes a month to pay the rent. So I'm thinking, like, again, my theory that I keep putting out there, and I'm going to keep putting it out there, is that it's kind of going back underground a little bit again.
Yeah, but you see, you have to hit a kind of an almost impossible sweet spot in terms of geography and population density. Because there have to just be enough people living in your vicinity who are going to show up for yoga.
It's true.
Right? And, of course, the more people that are available to show up to take your yoga class, the higher your rent is going to be. So you got to find a place where the rents are low.
The pond has to be the right size.
The pond has to be the right size with just enough fish in it to swim in your little pond, right? And in 5 years,
the pond,
everyone from Williamsburg is going to show up and ruin it.
Yeah, maybe.
Right? And your rent's going to skyrocket.
Maybe. I don't know. We're going to have to see. Again, we're in a really new territory, I think, for a lot of us. You too. I mean, you're making a change. You're not going to keep doing your programs here. But you got like a circuit. You got a tour planned, I'm sure, right? Got some travel.
Yeah, we got plans. I'm going to be, for my 60th birthday next year, I'm going to be in Australia.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and for Thanksgiving this year, for the first time in I can't remember how long, I'm going to be away and not with family because they don't have American Thanksgiving in Europe. And they were gigs, so I took them.
Yeah.
You know? So, yeah, it's changing a lot. So it changes the family landscape also. But let's not forget online. I mean, another amazing thing that came out of this place was that one of our students, Kelsey Kaufman, really loved what we were doing here so much that, you know, she was really missing it when she, you know, got married and moved to Colorado. And her husband, who already had his own online MBA thing going, said, why don't you, you know, do an online version of that anatomy course that you loved so much. That way you'll be able to still be, you know, part of it and all of that. And she approached me with the idea, and I thought it was awesome. And we that's the real reason we got in at that leading edge of online yoga content being delivered.
I know. I hate it when my friend Josh Citron, the producer of this podcast, is right, but many years ago he said it to me.
Why do you hate it when he's right? Just because that makes you wrong,
like,
or
well, no, but sometimes he'll see
because he rubs it in your face afterwards.
He'll see things ahead of time that are difficult things that I don't like. He said to me, "You know that a lot of yoga is going to move online, right?"
When did you say that?
Years ago, and I
what
fought
year?
him on it. I was like, "No, man, it's never going to."
Like 2012.
I was at least, 3-4 years ago. He kind of said it, and in the last 3 or 4 years, it's definitely happened. You know?
Oh yeah.
And I don't think it's bad. Again, like I've got a number of online stuff going, and now, and it's very rewarding. I make a lot of valuable connections,
but you don't have 6 million followers?
I don't have 2 million subscribers.
She has 2 million subscribers,
Adrienne Mishler, she's on recently.
No, I was listening to that.
It was very. What's interesting to me about that too is that 2 million subscribers thing. A lot of that does just boil down to like titles and thumbnails and working things that aren't yoga teachering. It's
there's an art to it. There's an art to it, and there's people that have entire businesses built on selling their services to people like us to help them master that art of YouTube and Facebook and all of that. And we're just kind of limping along, trying to update our Facebook with Instagram, which really doesn't work because it truncates all the text. And
you can't do that.
And doesn't Facebook own Instagram? Why don't they play together?
I don't know.
What is up with that?
But it's funny. I heard a friendly criticism of you recently.
Of me?
Of your newsletter. Criticism. They were saying that some people's newsletters are like they employ certain kind of marketing techniques, but they have no substance to them.
Right.
And yours is all substance with none of the effective marketing techniques. You have to you struggle to read it all, but they're like it's the best newsletter. It has amazing content, but it doesn't do like the kind of manipulative, coercive kinds of things that make marketing effective.
Let me just say something about that.
I think I'm not sure which one she was referring
They're
to. It
probably
might be
talking
the
about
yoga
the-
anatomy one, but she specifically said she's a friend of mine. She sort of does
Well,
it
she's
for
on the
a
list. She
living.
gets the weekly thing
She's
from
a friend of
.net.
Ryan's, actually. She's on Ryan's podcast,
All
Kate.
right.
And she basically said, let me have my hands on that newsletter. That's what she
No.
said.
Okay, what I will say about that, and if this person is talking about the yogaanatomy.net newsletter that we
Yes.
send out every week with the
Yes.
videos, it has a lot of content. Okay,
Yes.
I'm assuming that's what he's talking about. There is a science behind how that is put together. There is a science to manipulating people who don't like to be manipulated. And most yoga people are those people.
Yeah,
I won't say any more.
I guess. Well, Kate, I know you're going to listen to this she's
Because
a listener to this podcast. And I'm putting you in touch with them. I just called you out, but
Okay, well-
But my point is this: that again, like. I'm kind of contrasting other conversations I've been having on this podcast with, I think, like even Adrian's a good example, sort of like newer generation came into it at a different time than we did.
By the way, the other person you forgot to mention other than Sadie was Tara Stiles.
Oh, she was a YouTube person
Yeah, absolutely,
too?
absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was
And she built a very successful platform.
Did
Starting
she have
with
her modeling stuff before the YouTube or after the YouTube?
No, I think before, but
Yeah.
so did Colleen,
Yeah.
Rodney's wife. She was the tall one standing next to him when he was like ragging you on anatomy.
You heard about that, huh?
you told the whole world about that on your podcast.
That's true. It's true. For those of you who don't know, my infamous
It gets more
interaction
infamous
with
every
Rodney.
time you talk about it.
Colleen was really a diffuser. She was a diffuser in that situation. But
Yeah. Just like Andrew Tanner's a diffuser when
Well,
I
that's
encountered
actually-
William J. Broad at the presenters dinner at Yoga
yes, you
Journal.
mentioned that too. We
Yeah.
should. That's a good transition, actually, because
That encounter gets more violent every time Andrew tells the story, by the way.
I see. Well, what I wanted to transition to is because actually I am scheduled to talk with David Lipsius.
Yes, I'm very
in the,
interested to hear that.
Like in like a week and a half or something later this month. And we've touched base over the years about this, and you were like a anti-Yoga Alliance person for a long time, and then they started doing some things that you agreed with, and you sort of like were a little bit more on board with them. I don't know if you saw like the recent kind of releases, like press releases about what the plans are. Like he released his statement. I don't know if you saw that recently about
Sure,
what
and then
wants
he
to
had
do.
the thing with Yoga Journal where
That's right.
Yeah, he got to.
And I guess, for me, I'm a little nervous about it because everybody for years and years, people have been talking about how they want someone to come in and take action. They want there to be more teeth behind the standards. And
I know
you've been warning everybody like, I don't know. And then I'm afraid that it's going to happen. He said this new standards are going to be dealt with swiftly. He used the word swiftly.
He doesn't do things swiftly. Everything I've heard about this guy is that he takes very considered action.
Okay.
All right. I have not heard that he is someone that acts without considering the possibilities and educating himself.
Right.
But just before, when I was laughing, I was like, let me explain to you.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.